And they are the outcome of, like, I suppose, what people are calling snowflakes. No, you or I would never call our children snowflakes, but somebody somewhere has identified that there's a young cohort coming up that maybe haven't got the life skills to cope with adversity.
Dr.Dee Duffy, welcome to the podcast.
Dan Campion, thanks for having me.
Jesus, no one ever throws it back to me, so
it's intimidating,
welcome.
Isn't it?
Quite
when
intimidating,
somebody
yeah.
throws your name back.
Sit in this seat? How are you?
Good,
Yeah.
good, all good, yeah. Enjoying our heat wave.
I'm enjoying the heat wave too.
Our 2-day heat wave.
Our 2 day, which, let's not complain, we won't speak ill of the heat wave.
No. Bring it on.
Bring it on, absolutely. We're going to dive straight in here because I have so much to get through. I forgot to press the timer, so I'm going to press the timer now. Right,
Yeah.
we're on the button.
Yeah.
If you wouldn't mind giving us a bit of a background, because your background is fascinating to me anyway. Might not be fascinating to anybody else. Nobody will be listening here, but it's fascinating to me. But if you wouldn't mind, just for the listener who might not be familiar with you, give us a bit of background into who you were and where'd you come from. I said I wouldn't do the Cilla Black, but there we go.
Yeah. And then you did. So, yeah, background. It's an odd question,
It is
isn't
a
it?
weird
It's
question.
like, it's like, well, where do you begin?
Yeah.
What moment in life do you begin?
When were you born?
When did I start becoming this person that I am? But actually, that's a nice word. The word becoming I love that word. Obama, Michelle Obama, like that she chose that word for her book, Becoming. And I was like, that's so clever, it's so smart. Probably, I suppose along the lines of for my podcast was journeying. I love that idea of that, like, you're always evolving and always becoming maybe more or exploring more or, because there is no ultimate end. There is an ultimate end, and that is the end. So I suppose what I mean is there's no final destination in this world.
We are going straight in at the deep end here. I love it. No, I love that, yeah.
Well, so I suppose I love the reinvention of something. When people talk about reinvention of stuff, it's as if Madonna in the 80s or 90s when she goes off and goes, now I'm going to come back as, and now I'm going to come back as. And I don't think we as everyday people do that. But I suppose if you're, phases of life and ages and stages, you evolve and something, you go, this is what, your parents were talking about when you hit parenthood, or, this is why cliches are cliches. It's because it's all been done before in various shapes and forms. So as you hit different stages of life, I suppose you kind of evolve. And maybe that's what you're saying is interesting. I don't know, what is the stereotypical mother of two, early 40s? I don't know what, is that, who is the stereotypical
Yeah, that's
person?
Actually, because of my background in medicine, it was actually Owen Lacey, I think, said this the first time, and it made so much sense to me in medicine. Like, there is no average person. So to put it in really kind of easy terms to understand, so many people now are fitness experts or health experts, and they're giving out all this advice that's generic. And you're like, what is generic? Because when I was in the clinic, every single thing we did affected every single person in a different way. You could have two sisters, and the same diet or the same medical treatment would affect them completely differently. So there is no generic. There's no, what does Owen used to say? Homer Simpson, the average person is Homer Simpson. Like, there's no average person. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It's like a concept that makes it easier for our brains to, like, what's a normal person? Because we want to know what normal is, so we can kind of maybe orientate ourselves around that a bit so we're not outcast from society.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
And I suppose we borrow from popular culture or, what we're surrounding ourselves to kind of model ourselves on. And I suppose it's what and who you surround yourself with that you model yourself. Show me your 5 closest
100%.
people or friends and I'll show you who you are. So I would be conscious of that as well, because I think you become the product of the environment that you're in a sense.
Yeah.
And maybe you strategically gravitate towards a certain environment because you want to go down that road as such, or you want to be, or you admire these people and you want to emulate these people. So,
yeah.
So if I was to say, like, there was a time in place where I identified very much with my workplace and my identity was very much built, with being busy and work, then I would identify very much with academia and education and being in that space and surrounding myself in conferences and books and but that's always been a part of me anyway. Like, my heart filled with joy when I was walking through the supermarket or the shopping centre with my little son, and he looked at Eason's and said, "Oh, there's my favourite shop," because
Oh, no way.
my favorite place was always bookshops and stationery shops. And, like I just loved that, like just breathing in books. Or even if I went to other places, I'd find a library to go to, or, I was always drawn towards those spaces. So to see that was passed on to him, that he just kind of eyes lit up and he'd spend hours like flicking through books and Eason's. And I'm like, just...
You said something really interesting. You're taking a really interesting journey on this, because it is a really generic question. Tell us your background, but you've taken a really, really interesting journey on this one, because you just said there you've always had this gra for the bookshops and Eason's, but then you said it's great to see that it was passed on to your son. So it obviously was passed on to you from somewhere. Like, what's your take on? Do you think you were just born with this love for books and learning, or is there some influence in your life there?
Yeah. No, you would have to give my father credit for that, because one thing he always was, for him, it was a really important education. And like, he would never get involved in like buying things like, Christmas, and like kid of the 80s of 5. There wasn't many things, but when Christmas came, like that was always like, I hear now that it was my mother's, like she looked after that. But the one thing he would always add to the bag was the book. Like he would always go out and he enjoyed doing that. He's like anti-consumption, I would say. And like, he's not into it. He doesn't get it. So he'd love going to a bookshop and picking out books for all 4 of us. Then 5 of us, Dave, who came later. Sorry, Dave. Yeah, because there's always like this 4 that we came in stepping stones, and then Dave came 6 years.
Dave.
And
Dave.
At the light of our lives. But yeah, so I would say, and definitely, like, I mean, obviously as a teenager, you couldn't ask a question, but Dad would have a monologue back of, he'd, everything was an opportunity to educate or, tell you about something. So as much as you rolled your eyes as a teenager, probably influenced me a bit to maybe, well, like I said, he would have an interest in history. We have an interest, most of us would have in the family have an interest in history and kind of exploring our past and like through books and knowledge. So yeah, I would definitely give him credit for that. So, but again, it's a part of it is that influence. So for me, like being surrounded by books was the norm. And that was always important to me. Like say when I was finally getting my own house, a lot of people were talking, like maybe cushions and upholsteries. All I ever wanted was my own bookshelf.
Really?
Oh God, this is just what I dreamed of, like to have all my books in one place and to be able to just, pick and choose. And that was like what I dreamt of. And again, I wouldn't be I love nice spaces. I really enjoy nice spaces and nice design and everything. But that's what I saw as like, now I've landed, like this is home, like surrounded with books.
That's lovely though. There is something lovely about that because it's not the norm. And it's actually, when I say the norm, what is the norm?
Yeah.
Norm. And it's uncanny the similarities with my childhood as well, because it was my mother actually, but both my parents who encouraged reading in me. And I am 34 now, and every Christmas, all 4 of me and my 3 sisters still get 2 books each from my parents for Christmas as our like secret Santa gift. So Santa left something inside in the living room for them. We all march in, we're all in our 20s and 30s, and there's books there for us because they constantly nurture that. And as a result, I mean, you were overlooking at my library. It's a mini version of the library I have at home. I love it. Like, I crave it. But it's not the norm, because when I was younger, all the lads went to football, and I played football. I played all the sports, but when they were watching the games, I'd rather go read a book.
Really?
And that's I always thought that's just who I am. But obviously, my mom had a massive part to play in that. So it's really interesting to hear you talk like that as well. Because
yeah, like it's just like say even when my kids were babies, like straight away from about 2 months old, I would read to them every single night, like without fail. I would read to them like 2 months old, 3 months old. Just that was just part of the bedtime routine, and it was just.
Were you reading philosophy papers to your 2-month-old child?
Good night, Moon.
Yeah.
No, just for that, connection as well. And I think there is a lovely connection of true books and
Definitely.
telling stories and talking about them, and talking about it gives an opportunity because, with kids, well, yours are a bit younger, 4 and 1, but like if you ask a kid, how did you get on today at school? They won't tell you. They'll tell you nothing.
Yeah.
They will tell you absolutely nothing. It's like, why am I sending them? But it's not until nighttime. It's not until you get to that wind down time. Yeah, of course, they're buying time because they don't want to go to bed. But also through that connection of sleep, it's like or it's not sleep, but through the story as well, little triggers will start going in their brain, little remembrances, when you're not directly asking them, how was your day? Because even like if you think about yourself, when someone says, or you said, who are you? Or what, how was your day? I'd be like, fine. The instinct is to go grand. And your mind just goes blank. It's like, I can't even remember what I did
Why did that
today.
happen? Someone asked you to tell us a story, tell us a joke, how was your day? You just don't want to answer the question.
Oh, no. Because it's a demand on you, possibly. Whereas it's much more natural and organic in the nighttime or, in that kind of quiet time when the mind's settling and they're almost like playing little, reels over in their head of how the day went. And you might tell a little story about Jack and Jill or whatever in the story, but it'll trigger something in their little head of a story that happened during the day. And they'll tell it from their point, then they'll remember to tell you things.
Yeah.
And you're just looking at them going, some really significant stories that you would have liked to have heard like straight after school, but they don't remember then. It's like bags down, out to play or go get a snack or whatever. They don't want to direct questions. And I think we're all kind of like that.
Oh, definitely like that. I know Jill, my fiance, is listening to this and they're going, that's the reason. Because sometimes she'll ask me, how was your day? I could have had a crazy day. I'm like, yeah, it's grand, yeah.
Yeah.
She's like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
It's grand.
Yeah, no, direct questions don't work. It just has to be kind of like as you unwind probably. So kids are just the same.
That's fascinating. We're all just big kids, I suppose, yeah.
Yeah.
So how did that, I suppose it's kind of obvious now, but how did that path lead you down the road to philosophy?
Yeah, well, so it's a Doctor of Philosophy. So Doctor of Philosophy in marketing. So Doctor of Philosophy would be any deep research in an area. So mine was, we'll say it was in marketing. But what that means is, but philosophia, like the word philosophy in ancient Greek, it was love of wisdom. And I just think that's really lovely
cool.
Because I do think it was a privilege for me to have that time and space, that 4 years, to go deep into a subject and research and explore and read. And I often remind myself that I'm grateful and it was a privilege to have those 4 years in my life that I could just kind of dig deep into something. But it is in marketing, but I used like French philosopher Michel Foucault's work and sociological theories to look at consumer behavior and consumption and in particular men's consumption and leisure practices. So I do draw on like philosophers by chance, like that was, but a Doctor of Philosophy, that's what it means, like as in a deep research into, so a love of wisdom of something.
Okay, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
But like for me, like when I think about the word philosophy, it's not dusty old books in the library and men in robes sitting there like pondering questions of the world. It is what you've just explained to me there. It's like there's a deeper layer to everything. The philosophy of it, like a personal philosophy. I have a personal philosophy. Most of us have. Well, I hope not. And nowadays it's quite difficult actually, but yeah. So now having you explain that to me makes perfect sense because it is that deeper layer. It is a kind of a going below the veil, I suppose, a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Which again, I think has been popularized in recent times and which is a good thing, by Ryan Holiday and his work with the Stoics.
Yeah, I've listened to so much stuff over the last week on the Stoics for some reason.
Yeah. And I mean, like he is criticised, I suppose, for, marketing and packaging it up. But at the same time, if he's bringing it to a wider audience and a younger audience and encouraging younger people, you said, I think everyone has a personal philosophy. No, they don't.
No. I'm going to elaborate on that because I said that and like, why did I say that? I don't believe that. But I'll confirm that.
You would like to think, but at the same time, no judgment. I certainly didn't have one at 17 or 18. So if he's putting these ideas and wisdom and, kind of philosophical ideas into young people's heads, bring it on. Like in a packageable format, making case study analogies to more recent figures, public figures. So really making it accessible. And that's right. Like that, to democratize knowledge is good because, it was very much kept in the realms of the, upper classes or the moneyed who could afford access to universities and college and therefore they could talk in much more depth. But now with the democratization of knowledge and spreading it and making it in, not using language that keeps people out, but actually brings people in and that they can feel a part of and add to that knowledge. So, it's easy to put yourself on a pedestal by using big words and language that nobody can actually join the conversation with you because they've no idea. I always think like a great educator is somebody who makes things so simple. Like you're just looking at them going like, that didn't take much. But actually, they've really done so much work to simplify the idea, that's where they're clever, because they're also a communicator of the knowledge, rather than talking in a highfalutin level, but not able to bring it down to, well, what do you mean? And I love that. Like, just what do you mean by that? Like in layman's terms. I always like to say that. Like even, if you're talking to students, like trying to get them to unpack their ideas for a thesis or supervision, it's like, just tell me in layman's terms, because sometimes when you're starting a research study, you keep using, even though you have an idea of like half of the theorists' ideas, you're kind of regurgitating paraphrasing what they've said. But by reading it, the student doesn't really know, or certainly the reader doesn't know what they think they have inferred or that they want to infer. So the best way is going layman's terms. What is it you want to do? Tell me, and what does that mean to you? And let's unpack that. So that's a skill set as well, of unpacking the wordy, lofty ideas into bite-size. Well, not bite-size. I'm not talking about condoning Twitter 180 or whatever hashtag. That's my thesis. But that you can actually say what you're trying to say in little short, like kind of elevator pitch.
That is fascinating. What you've just said there is fascinating to me, because there's so many elements to it. First of all, the first thought that comes to my head is, obviously this is an area where an expert. If you have these great ideas and you can't communicate them to people, do they even exist for those other people? And a lot of people get it, like Ryan Holiday just explained there, they get a bit of flack nowadays for oversimplification. Now, this is where it gets really messy, because a lot of people do try to oversimplify to sell something because they don't even understand it themselves, but they know it sells. And there's concepts like mental health that over the last 4 or 5 years, people have latched onto as an effective way of kind of being relatable to their market, but they don't actually want to talk about mental health. They just want to sell you whatever they have to sell you. So there is that element. However, in my experience, most people don't fall into that category. They fall into the category of they want to help, but they can't effectively communicate with the person because they don't understand, which is essentially marketing. They don't understand how to market themselves or their ideas. And if you can't market yourself, because that word marketing has a negative connotation, doesn't it?
Yeah, sure.
And to me, it never did. And I remember someone showing me that book, Fear, years ago. Have you ever heard of the book Fear? It was a marketing book that was essentially explained how to capitalize on people's fears to sell them things. And I was like, I mean, it depends on what you're selling them, to be honest with you, because it's like that poster. Did you ever see that poster? And it's like the word sex is giant. And it's, now that I've got your attention, have you heard about our latest poodle walking rally or whatever it is? Like, if you can't capture someone's attention or imagination or inspire them in some way, they're probably not going to consume the information. And if you believe the information you have is valuable or beneficial to that person, you're almost doing them a disservice by not being able to effectively market your idea to them. And I'm using market in a kind of slightly different way there. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, well, not them a disservice, possibly you as well, as in like,
everybody.
Yeah. I mean, if you really feel you've got something that adds value, and that's what I talk about, like when you talk about marketing, it's like, well, are you adding value to somebody's lives? Well, then it kind of takes away the ickiness of like marketing or thinking about like that, kind of Avon salesperson or whatever, of old salesperson. But yeah, so I think there's so many ways and messages and mediums coming at people that you have to get savvier of getting your message through all the noise. And that's it's such an art now to actually reach people. Like, and like you say, and that was probably a reason behind my podcast as well, because I was listening, because I just kind of started listening to podcasts regularly. And I was like, why am I listening to an influencer telling me about a topic that I tuned into this because it was like something like, say, like that it might have had a tag of something that I was genuinely interested in. Like you say, take the idea of mental health. And then you've got somebody talking about me. And this is going in no depth, or, I've heard this. How could that person be the only voice for all these different topics? And I realized I know so many people that would be so more interesting, in my opinion, and knowledgeable, and have a different angle than these same voices that would be on every podcast. I was like, we have so many people out there. But again, if they just had maybe, more voice training, more confidence of, not everybody can get on. Some influencers have no problem getting out there, and fair play to them. They're great about like putting their names forward for so many things. But like, I do think you need to go, well, are you sure that's what your niche is? So I suppose that's what I was thinking when I was going, I would like other voices. And more regular voices on alternative viewpoints on topics. So that's where journeying and the idea came through. Because, you know, in academia, and this is a problem with academia, there's so many interesting conversations going on. Like we go to, you know, when you go to a conference and you're hearing really cool topics and ideas, but they don't go any further than maybe a publication. And the goal for an academic is to get into a 4-star tiered journal, which comes with years of research to actually get published. And, you know, it has to be a certain structure and format that becomes inaccessible. And the length of time it takes with everything that's happening so fast these days, you could be 4 years researching and it's out of date by the time it actually goes to publication. And how many people read a 20, 30 page research document? It's an art.
Too.
Yeah, no, because it's an art to learn how to read those. And, you know, if you had a vague interest in, you might read the abstract, like if you had an interest, but people don't read to that depth, only a small, minute people. So, and it is happening in academia where like those who write their 30-page document are then encouraged to make a 2-3 page accessible kind of brief of the topic, but getting more of those voices into the public domain. And, you know, let's have a conversation with somebody who actually knows about mental health or actually knows a bit more depth. I don't mean that in a facetious way. Of course, people, and certainly people have so many of their personal stories to tell, and I love them. You know, like if you have personal, relatable stories and that. But, you know, do you know what I mean? There's just some voices that like are going, oh, yeah, I'll talk about that. And you're like,
Yeah, this is so funny. I need you in here working with me or teaching me, because unconsciously, this is what I started doing a few years ago with this business. Because through my, that's all about me. Through my journey,
oh, blah, blah, blah.
through my journey in the clinic, meeting loads of people and hearing loads of people's stories, I was overwhelmed by how much value other people had to add to my life, but by the stories they were telling us. That's incredible. Now, they weren't being recorded. It was a one-on-one in a clinic environment. They were there for help, and I was just trying to understand these people so I could help our team and our doctor figure out what the best way to help these people was. But I was like really struck by both the professionals I worked with and the people I met, how much value people had that I wasn't getting from the influencers that you were mentioning, because I was getting the headline stuff that would suck me in and be like, oh, this is really interesting.
Yeah.
And then I was getting the generic thing that I've heard in all the other podcasts. I'm like, oh my God. So that inspired me to go on my own podcasting journey, just like you. But I wanted to go another level, and I wanted to help other people get their stuff out there, because it started with the doctor I worked with. The man is a genius, but didn't have the, let's call it the marketing capabilities to reach other people where they were, because he was so high level. And he was really, really good at speaking to people one-on-one.
Yeah.
But if you listened to him on a podcast or on a video, it was really inaccessible because he was so intelligent. So we wanted to do a podcast, and I had this passion for helping other people like get their voice out there. And I was almost like a translator. Like, they would say something, I was like, this is what this person is saying, and then the listener could engage a little bit more. So now when I have a client in here and they come in and we have a conversation and they want to start a podcast, the only thing in my head is we have to make sure that you do not become an influencer, that you don't ask the questions other people are asking, that you don't default back to, because it's fear, you don't default back to fear mode and become this influencer, because you have real value here. And little things like if you're telling your own story, it can sound so narcissistic that no one's going to listen. But you can tell the same story in a way that makes it really relatable to other people. How do we do that? How do we relax and be more natural and actually sound like we're enthusiastic and gay? I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was like, I would listen to the person and say, if you can tell me your story and I'm not bored, I don't think you're a narcissist, other people would be the same. Let's do that. And I built essentially a business around doing that, but I didn't understand it with what you just explained to me there. So I needed you in here 3 or 4 years ago, because it's fascinating.
No, it is. And I think the medium of podcasting more and more is becoming, it's almost, we're integrated, like say in the academic world. Like I worked with a group of people last year, and instead of writing a paper, we put our research into a podcast. Because like I was familiar with the format. Yeah. So it was just a different way. So it is entering the mainstream kind of academic world of a source of information. So, and I said to you the last time, how I use podcasts is if I want to find out something, if I want to like kind of research something.
I'm the exact same.
I will put in the search words, the keywords, search words. And that's why I always wrote really lengthy show notes, because I was like, well, if somebody wants to find out all these topics, it's here, like, and I was kind of really detailed. But then you have those podcasts where they sell you, and they've got so much effort into telling you this is a podcast about, and then you're listening to 5 minutes of ads, and then you're listening to, drivel. When like, no, I actually wanted to find out about something, like not 2 minutes of something with all your ads, breaks, and kind of some fluff around it. Maybe that's just me coming back to my kind of more serious academic lens. I mean, I love it. I mean, one of my favorite podcasts is Joanne McNally, and my therapist ghosts me.
Yeah.
That's my absolute, I feel like I'm just listening in on friends, like having it, and I look forward to that. So it's not that I don't love that, I love that, but at the same time, if I specifically put in, I want to find out about the Stoics. I don't want to hear somebody waffling on about mild interpretations, or I want solid.
Yeah, but that's another thing about there's something for everybody. So
yes,
there's coffee shops for everybody. There's personal trainers for everybody. There's education for everybody.
True.
There's
yeah,
podcasts for everybody. But it's the same point, because if my therapist ghosted me, if they were trying too hard, or it was very clear that they were curating a lot of the humor, or because they're very relatable to a lot of people. So that's why people listen. If we got a sense as listeners that was curated, we wouldn't listen. It's the same thing as we got a sense that this person doesn't actually know what they're talking about. They're just using buzzwords. So the same rule applies.
True.
Most of my friends don't listen to this style of podcast that we're doing right now. They want Off the Ball, for example. And that's no problem. I don't get upset by that. That's their style. And they found something that they really connect with. And the people running that show obviously are doing a great job of providing the information in a way that connects with their audience.
That's
so
true.
I find it so interesting. And even my clients, people come in here, I have so many clients in so many different worlds, and it's the same principle I try and work on with all of them in their particular world. It's all the buzzwords: be authentic. It's actually care about the things that you're talking about. Your metrics for success are very important. Your expectation for the outcome. Forget about all of that stuff. Can you connect with another person? Can you tell your story in a way that's going to add value to someone else's life? If that's funny and it's humor, fine. If it's gossip and it's entertainment, that's fine. If it's deep research on Stoics and the philosophy of marketing, that's fine.
Just make sure it is.
Just 100%. It needs to be. But the principle's the same across all of those.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, fair.
Yeah, and it's the same principle that you're talking about there, which is the ability to communicate effectively, to create a vessel to inject your value into someone else's bloodstream.
Yeah.
Kind of what you're trying to do.
Yeah. But it was just about that, kind of voices that, and again, another thing that I would say is why should we be marketing ourselves? Do you know, it's almost become this channel of, why can't we just live our lives without thinking about what would this beautiful scenic picnic that I'm having right now look like as an Instagram photo? Or, why do I need to package up and market myself? I'm saying this from the point of view of course, I'm on the Instagram realm, not heavily, but there is that idea of it's going, just have a moment of itself, as opposed to thinking about, and we've become, because of social media, marketing our own selves and personal lives, which can be exhausting as well.
So why do you do a podcast? Why don't you just invite these people for a conversation?
It's really interesting. Yeah, no, and that's what I need to unpack as well. Because I was, I'm like, will I go back to doing the podcasting? And I really want to, and do you know why? Because I was like, no, I got a lot out of it because I go deep into researching a subject. And I think another reason was, actually, that was another reason behind me starting the podcast, was because I lecture, I could put my heart and soul into a 1 to 2 hour lecture that was gone, that was done.
It's like Snapchat.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. It was like, oh, that was really good content. But it was gone forever. Or you might get a really interesting guest in to speak to the students. But if they weren't there at that moment in time, it was gone. So yeah, when we went online, you could capture it and record it and save it. And I was like, well, instead of inviting guests in, why don't I create a deep conversation that the students can listen to in their own time when they want to. So I had, because a lot of my work was in sustainable fashion and sustainability and consumption. So I'd have guests on about that. And then I would use that as a resource for my students to go, okay, listen to this conversation or listen to that. And then we can have a chat around it. Or what do you think about, not consuming anything for a year? So it could be a discussion point to enter into a conversation around consumption and sustainability and fashion. So that was another reason why I did it, why I wanted to so I had few rationale, but I do think the main thing coming back for it is it gave me something to dig deep into and, explore topics that I'm genuinely interested in a deeper level, research it, and then actually get to meet that person one-on-one and talk to them about their perspective on it as well. So and have it as evergreen content.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that. And there's something you said there about giving it to your students. You do believe that you're giving them value.
I hope so.
So again, that is marketing yourself. You want not in a way that you want them to think you're deadly, but you believe that you can enhance their lives in some way by giving them this information that's going to help them potentially with their research or with their work. But it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah, with novel way of consuming information.
Yeah.
Rather than the traditional sage on stage of me, log in and I'll tell you all about this.
Yeah. Okay.
Instead, let's get another voice in it, and then you have to, in your own time, go for a walk. Like I'd say, listen to that on a walk or whatever, and we'll come back and chat about it and give me your perspective. So it gives them time to distill the information if they so wish, and come back and participate in the class.
Yeah. I'm still circling around this question you asked about why do we feel the need to market ourselves? And like, if you look at the answer, which I don't have, but if you look at the outcome at the answer, if people didn't market themselves, you wouldn't have access to the podcast that you find very valuable. So maybe there's something there, this community or this need to contribute to the tribe or something you want to, like, why do we want, because I said something to you earlier on and we were laughing about it, that people don't care what other people think, but we do care what other people think of us, and we do care about how we're perceived in terms of our contribution to the group. And maybe, I don't like always going back to the caveman times, but the tribe times, maybe that's to do with the fact that we need to feel like we're contributing, because if we're not, we'll be maybe ostracized from the group. And if you were ostracized, you didn't survive because you needed other people.
Yeah, but like back then it was more meaningful connections, as in these people for survival of food and, being part of a day-to-day connection to society. But like if you call your 2,000 followers or your 2 million followers, whatever extent you're at, your tribe, I mean, you need to go back to what a tribe is.
100%. But I don't know, you'll know more about this than me, but I think that we haven't evolved. Our physiology hasn't evolved fast enough to keep up with the stuff that's happening. So I think that a lot of the reason, say for example, I had a really interesting experience when I'm young, and I won't name the person, but there was somebody I knew got really upset when this person posted something on social media and didn't get the response they expected. Really upset. And I looked at that person and I was like, this person genuinely believes that they're going to die, because the body is experiencing these same feelings of rejection and of panic and of stress. And the body doesn't know it's because you didn't get a like on your Facebook post. The body thinks that it's because you're not being accepted. It's the same way if you make a joke and somebody doesn't laugh and you're like, oh, Jesus Christ, my fucking life is over. Because your body is like, it's cortisol, it's a stress response. It doesn't know it's because you made a joke and no one didn't laugh. You're just feeling a stress response. So I think our basic instincts haven't become refined enough to differentiate between it's only a social media post and we've no food tomorrow, or the group is going to ostracize me. I think the basic responses are the same. So that's why so many people nowadays, they feel so stressed or panicked or upset by something that happens. And we kind of look at it objectively and we go, that's not even that important. But to that person's brain and physiology, they're dying.
Yeah.
They're like,
so the body goes into, and it is the danger of social media and of what we're looking for, the recognition that we're looking for, the acknowledgement that we're looking for. And it's very public.
Yeah.
It's very public. Like, if you put up a post and you genuinely had a private group with 60 people, the other 60 people would take more responsibility if they were in this private, and, they would take responsibility for how they would interact with your post.
Of course. Yeah. Because there's accountability there as well. You're in a small group.
Yes.
And you're potentially going to be called out if you disrespect.
So that's probably more akin to the caveman times of,
there's
behaving and,
that's
kind
how
of
it should be.
Morals. When you go to join a private group or page and you have to tick that you agree with the rules of the game. Yeah. So I suppose that's probably more like, because you're saying, okay, I want to be part of this community and therefore I will abide by the rules of the community.
But we don't live in that world. We live in a global, everybody gets to judge you world.
If we choose.
Absolutely, if we choose. Now, I'm going to touch on a sensitive topic here because it's in the same vein, but I think it's important. If you have a young person, and really, unfortunately, over the last few years, there's been young people taking their own lives and all sorts of stuff. And for me, it's tied in with the same thing. But these young people, unlike me and you, I know we're still very young, but unlike me and you, they haven't had the opportunity for their brains to develop outside this world of social media. If you're 16 or 17, you grew up with access to all these things. Whereas I grew up and I didn't have any access. So I had a little bit of time where my brain could kind of be a little bit normal, quote unquote.
Yeah.
So that a person who decides to take their own life, or who gets really, really upset or recluse because of something they saw on social media, they're in a headspace where they think their life is over and the best thing to do is to end it, or the best thing to do is drink or take drugs or something like that. So the reason I'm saying this, I'm not overstating the dangers of social media. I'm really trying to understand what it's doing to our brains, because it's a tool and it can be really positive or it can be really negative. And you just said the most important thing there. We can decide how we interact with these things. But when you're very young, or even when you're not very young, I know loads of people who really struggle with these platforms. Sometimes I find myself like the hand just reaching for the phone. Sometimes you can get consumed by that. You tie that into something that you actually deem as important, like business. If my Instagram isn't running well, my business doesn't grow. If my business doesn't grow, I can't feed my family. We're all going to die. And then you kind of go into this like primal spiral.
Yeah.
That's why I call this whole thing primal. I really want to understand. But do you see the brain reacting in that way to these things?
Yeah. Well, I think like if you take that cohort, that teen cohort of people, like, so when young people are in their teenage years, the most important people to them is their peers.
Yeah.
Like, so we, like, as parents, become kind of second fiddle. We're just plagues in their lives, and the peers are where they're going to take their direction from. So if their interaction with peers is not even in that physical social space, but one step removed in the social world or the tech world, there's more of an opportunity for bullying, or, you know, that kind of, without the perpetrator having to take responsibility or see the pain they've inflicted on the other person. Now, I've had this experience at a minor level, but like knocked it in the head straight away with my own son, because it totally caught me off guard, because I'm very like careful about like probably, because I know so my boy's 9, and so I know it's his friends are starting to, you know, look at YouTube, and they're beginning to kind of, you know, he's pushing for more access to play games and computer games. So I'm really strict about it. But I let him start playing this game called Clash of Clans. I like the Minecraft and, you know, that idea of building and constructing. And I knew he'd become part of a group, like, but with his friends. And I didn't really get it. I kind of probably took my foot off the pedal a bit, like with the intensity of monitoring. And I didn't really realize there was a thread that they were able to communicate on. But what happened was he was in his room, and again, normally wouldn't, but he had like 15 minutes of playing with it. But I walked into the room and I found him, like, he looked at me and he was like, he was trying to keep a straight face, because he knew, like, I'm so strict about it, that if there was a problem with this, like, that I'd be down on, you know, I'd ban it again, like, for... And I could see him trying to hold back, and then he just burst out crying. And I was like, you know, totally, I was like, oh my God, like, this is the start of it. I was like, what's after happening? So one of his friends had excluded him or kicked him out of the group. Now, when I say that felt as real to him as if he'd been outside playing on the green, and if he had been outside on the green, he probably would have been able to use, you know, his voice and his, you know, little, you know, being to, or, you know, negotiate his way back into the group, or, you know, use social skills. But no, this boy was able to just cut him out, and he couldn't get back in. So he didn't have access to get back into this. I think there was maybe 6 of them, of his friends, that were in this little group, a clan, that were building the town and going into battles. But he was left on the outside. Just one, you know, brutal chop.
Yeah.
And
it's powerful.
Yeah.
It's powerful stuff.
Yeah. He was crying on that bed and didn't know how to deal with this, you know, and I had to explain to him, well, you know, you've talked about cyberbullying in school, and this is it. Do you know, and he was like kind of a bit taken aback by that as well. And I said, well, it is, isn't it? Like, you know, look at you, you're left crying here, and it's on tech world. We can't, you know, how can we deal with this? How can we help you? How can we support you? And then I'm conscious of like, if I become the draconian mother who takes this away from him, you know, because my temptation was, heck, that, like, a computer's gone again. So it's there, and it's getting younger and younger. And it's like, how, you know, those social skills that they're learning and developing in school, if you keep letting kids just communicate through technology, then you need to teach a whole other skill set of how to communicate through technology as well. But it's so brutal because it's removed. And that's human nature. The further we are removed from something. You know the trolley test? You heard the
No.
trolley test experiment?
No.
So it's kind of a hypothetical scenario. If a trolley was coming down a hill and there was one person on the tracks and it was going to hit, it was 5 people on the tracks and it was going to hit, you could choose to divert the trolley and just kill one person on the other track, or push the person off to get out. You could push someone. Something about, okay, so let me get it. Yeah, so you can choose to save 5 lives, but kill one.
Okay.
Human nature, people will, they would say no to pushing the person off because they would feel like the perpetrator, but they would be they would be more inclined to press a button. So if we, removing ourselves from the physical scenario of seeing that person in front of us and us taking responsibility for pushing them, they'd rather let kind of faith take its course and let the trolley take 5 people. But if you say, okay, you can push a switch or a lever from a faraway place, then you can, save 5 lives and be the hero and justify the one gone. So again, just that idea of the importance, I suppose, of the social spaces and physical spaces to be human and to have our human reactions to going, oh God, I don't want to physically kill somebody with my hands.
Yeah. That's so interesting. There's so many things I want to ask you about what you just said there, but I'll try and keep it a little bit coherent for people. First of all, I think, because this is what I wanted to ask you about parenting specifically, and you've naturally gone there anyway, about how do we adapt our parenting styles to the rapid changes in the world when we don't even understand them ourselves. And you have a particularly deep level of awareness just from having spoken to you before, but also from your professional background. So this is why I wanted to pick your brain on this. All of this is kind of tied in nicely for us with how the brain responds when you don't, you pointed out really nicely there, when you don't have that physical connection, that actual eye contact, having to look someone in the eye. Because if your son was out there with a bunch of lads in the green and tried to exclude him, he'd probably fight his way back in.
Quite possibly.
You politically put it, he said he'd negotiate his back in. I'm sure he would negotiate.
Whatever form that would take.
And my personal belief is that's healthy. I believe that's healthy for young boys especially. And young girls have similar but other tools that they use as well, and it is different. And I don't know, was it Steven Pinker I was listening to before talking about the social media with girls specifically is very, very dangerous because males tend to use physical aggression to resolve conflict, and females tend to use how did he put it, it's reputation destruction or assassination or something like that. So they behind the back kind of stuff and words and character assassination, and giving them a tool like social media, it's the perfect weapon for character assassination because you've no defense. You've no defense. You can't defend yourself. But similarly with your son, he can't defend himself. So it's not good for anybody, these tools.
No.
So my question is, because I've loads of other stuff, but I won't go there yet. When most people, and I say most, don't really understand what this is yet, and probably won't and for another 10 or 15, 20 years maybe, how do we negotiate this with our children? Because I have 2 young children and I think about this all the time. And I'm very, I won't say aware, but I'm very, very conscious that I have to understand this in order to in some way be able to help my child. I can't be the parent who takes away the technology. I have to allow them to engage. It's almost vital because it's going to be part of their lives forever. It's going to affect their careers and everything. So I have to allow them to engage and learn, but I want to be able to teach them how to do this. And this is where the word resilience comes up for me a lot as well. And I know you're big on this with your children especially. How do we give our children the tools? Number one, is that what you believe? Do you believe we need to give our children the tools to negotiate this as opposed to protect them from it? That's number one. And number two, how? Give me the answer, Dee.
Yeah.
Please give me the answer.
Well, now I don't want to let you
Everyone's
down.
leaning forwards in their seat here now, Dee. Every parent listening
Oh,
to
yeah.
this.
Oh, gosh, if I had the answer. Look, when you said, how do we protect them from it? We can protect them up to a point. I think we have to be, realistic about this in a sense that we can probably create boundaries. How can we shield them from it? The only way we're going to do it is if we empower them and educate them to recognize the behavior and recognize so that now my son can call it cyberbullying. And then he can relate it back to what he's learned in school. Like schools are great for trying to introduce these ideas. So he was able to then go, oh, that was cyberbullying. If I see that behavior again, I can call that person out on it, because no child, particularly if they're still young, like they don't want to be called a bully in any sense. It's a very, very, kind of negative connotations, obviously. So, and to be fair, like I would teach my son as well that boy didn't know that what he was doing was cyberbullying. He was acting out of his own little angry space as well, like, or whatever notion he had at the time. It's not that he's inherently bad or bold. He made a bad choice. It's not the child, it's the choice that he made. And it's about choices. And this is like why I love choice theory, because like I talk about a lot, like, and use it with my children. It's because I'm not going to be always there. And the older they get, I'm not going to be there. So I can only give them information, give them the whys behind why I'm asking you to do X, Y, or Z, or why mommy doesn't let you watch as much TV or play as much TV or computer games as your peers. But one day you're going to have to make those choices and decisions for yourself. Now, I know, because I'm trying to get the balance right, because I would have come from a very disciplinarian house, and the instinct is to retaliate against that. So if there's too much constriction, or too much, you just want to you act out of a childlike space to retaliate. Whereas I'm trying to get a balance that rather than, that they end up, but that they see the why. Because obviously, like, say for me now, like there was lots of restrictions on what we were and weren't allowed to do. Teenage years, there was probably a lot of rebellion. And then you go into adulthood, parenthood, and then you go, okay, I can see why those ideas were there, but if they had been delivered in a different method or means. And I'm trying to find different ways. And I think information of the why behind something is really important, which backfires because, like, even last night, so my daughter, I said to her, like, you can't watch that movie because it was close to bedtime. We wouldn't be able to watch the full movie. But I just said, you can't watch it. You can just watch a cartoon. And she went off in, and I found her in watching the movie. And I was like, but I told you not
What
to.
is she?
She's 6.
6.
And no, she could buy and sell, and she's a choice theorist. Like, she gives it all back to you. She's like, but mommy, you didn't tell me why. You didn't give me enough information as to why not to watch it.
That sounds like my daughter.
I was just like, okay, you could have asked me. If there was any doubt, you could have asked me. But again, she was calling me out on what she hears from me. I'm going to give you information, and what you choose to do with it. Or, as they're younger, you kind of have to maybe mold their choices a little bit. But I do know from teenage years, it's not going to be as easy to mold their responses. They're going to want to do what their peers are doing. And I think that's where hopefully some of the toolkit that I'm trying to equip them with now, that they might draw on that, like when in their teenage years, to go, okay, say for example, their sports, if they like, it's non-negotiable that they're active right now. But what happens when they hit 14, 15, the stereotypical years of people dropping off and saying the GA, the football, that's notorious, isn't it? Like that kind of age group.
100%.
Because they either get attracted to foreign sports or more often like going to discos and whatever, like drink gets involved, and it's harder to stay disciplined. But like, as well as hopefully always being there for them, that they can draw on the reasons why when I'm not there, or when their dad's not there, but it's a minefield, because if you think about, like, even historically, it's only in the last 50 years, 70 years that we have this extended teenage into adulthood period where you've got these essentially grown men. Like, in one time would have had their own homes at 21 and families at 19, 20, 21, and having to buy a house, fend for themselves, have kids by themselves. And now you're living in your house with these grown adults, and you're still trying to teach them, they continue to behave like children because you're in that parent-child dynamic. So that's it. That's new territory as well. The fact that we have grown adults living with adults, parents. And I do think, like they say, and I know even research said, oh, the brain's still developing into like 26. I'm like, bloody hell, like, you know, how long how long do they want to milk this teenage kind of, or, you know, a growing period from it? Essentially, like that's what, over a decade and a half of teenage years, or, you know, hiding behind this idea, well, the brain's not fully developed. It's like, yeah, well, you know, it's a lot of, you want a lot of responsibility. And I say that, like, that's what, like, I say with the kids again, it's responsibilities. It's trying to give them responsibilities. They want pets. I'm like, the day you can commit to picking up that pet, feeding that pet, walking it every day is the day you'll get a pet. And they're just looking at me going, yeah, right. And I was like, yeah, it's a lot of responsibility, isn't it?
Sure, you'll do it, man.
Yeah, and that I'm not doing it. Like, unless I ever want one, then I'll get one. But if I'm not doing it for somebody else who tells me like that they're going to do it, because there's loads of responsibility and I don't want it, like. But if they're prepared to do it, they can have it, like maybe when they're a bit older. Obviously I wouldn't put that on them now, like.
Yeah.
So it is about that taking a little bit of responsibility. So it's gradually, and now, like, you know, we get them to do things like empty the dishwasher every day and you know, make their beds and those small little things, do their exercise in the morning. It's just a little small structure that hopefully helps them to develop their own healthy routines. Now, look, there could be parents with teenagers laughing at me going, yeah, you know, wait till you get the teenage years and try to get them to make their bed. But the why might be important.
Yeah.
Why they're doing it. Not for me, but for themselves.
I think what you're saying is one of the most important conversations that we need to have at the moment, because it's about our kids, really. And I'm not talking, this is for people who don't have children as well. This is just as important. Because the reason I asked you this question, I knew the type of answer you were going to give, and it's very impressive, and it's the model I subscribe to, and I'll definitely learn from listening to you speak about these things. But my observations today are, we see people our age having children, and we don't have the tools and awareness about ourselves. We don't have our personal philosophies. We don't have an idea of long-term gain from short-term discomfort. So building routines and regimens like emptying the dishwasher, we don't see how that's good for us in the long term as adults. I'm talking with the general we, I'm not talking specifically me and you. So we are less likely to pass these tools, as you put them, onto our children. And what I observe nowadays as well is, I'm laughing because I sent you these words, progressive social issues. What I'm referring to here is essentially the snowflakeification of our youth. And people get really angry when I speak about this sometimes. But the people who get angry are the people who are in denial about what I'm actually talking about. What I'm trying to express here is a concern that we're not giving our young people the tools that they will need to grow up in a world that is far different from what it used to be even 20 or 30 years ago. And we can see that this world is changing. We've just spoken about it, social media and access and internet and large communities compared to small communities. So we know it's changing. We can't deny that. But we are not giving our young people the tools that they will probably need to navigate the world. We don't know what it's going to be in 10, 15, 20, 30 years' time, but we do know that if people have a personal philosophy, if they understand discipline, if they have some sort of resilience against, for example, you're teaching your son at the moment, if somebody bullies him or cyberbullying, he will be resilient. He'll understand how to navigate that. He'll start to understand eventually it's not about him, it's about that other person. He'll learn this from you and from having the experience of it over and over again. But we're trying to remove that, I feel, not, again, the royal we, we're trying to remove obstacles and remove difficulty and remove challenge and protect, because that's how we feel. We want an easier life and we want to be protected. We want it to be easier. So we don't want our children to have any of these things. And in a lot of cases, it comes from a really good place. I don't want my child to suffer. But a little bit of stress inoculation or difficulty inoculation is really, really good. I'm just concerned that we're going to be left with a generation and then future generations of people who really struggle. And I'm watching it now, my own generation and younger, people who really, really struggle because they don't have those tools. And I'm trying to learn them in my 30s. Yeah. I'm trying to learn how to be more resilient and to be, because I want to be able to pass that on to my daughter and my son. And I don't have all the tools I need yet, so I'm doing this podcast with you because I want to learn. I'm desperate for knowledge. Yeah. But there's a resistance to that because things should be easier. You have to let me be whatever I want to be, and I can think whatever I want to think, and the world has to adapt around me. And that's the message that we're giving to a lot of people nowadays. And at the start, and you're probably familiar with Jordan Peterson. When I first heard of Peterson, I was like, oh, it's happening. Here's the first person to kind of stand up and overtly say, I'm not dealing with any of this bullshit. Now, I don't agree with everything Peterson says necessarily, but to see somebody standing against a wave of madness gives me a little bit of hope. But the wave of madness is coming, and it's young people, and they're struggling, and they're dealing with crises of self. I'm going really deep here, and sense of purpose. And I know that a lot of the stuff you just explained to me is the antidote. It's the cure, essentially. It's not another popular word, to a lot of this angst that ends up with really unhappy people. And you mentioned men specifically. I'm going to ask you a question next. I'm going to remind myself to ask you a question about men next. I see a lot of men specifically in my generation who are grown children. We're just children because we're very, very soft and privileged and delicate, and we don't have the tools we need that potentially our fathers had and our fathers' fathers had, just to kind of to protect ourselves from this world of madness. Does that make sense to you? Or is that what I'm saying there absolute nonsense?
No, it makes sense. But again, I mean, there's not many people who go, yeah, I raised a snowflake. That's what I did. I helicopter parented and I raised a snowflake. Like, because we don't like these terminologies. They're not sound. Anybody who helicopter parented did so
wanted
under
the best for their children.
You wanted,
100%.
And that was what the literature was saying, and that was what the peer, not the peer, but like, you weren't a good parent unless you were, in fighting Johnny's case with the teacher. Like, I mean, I was lecturing and had parents contacting me on behalf of their children to say, like, children, like as in their adult children, explaining why somebody couldn't make it to class, or trying to argue something on behalf of the student. And I was just like, what are you doing? Like, what are you trying to do to your adult child here who's taking their first steps into adulthood, and you're trying to pull the rug from underneath them by contacting their lecturer? I mean, that would have been unheard of, like, back in traditional times. And again, like, you're in this space of, you don't want to offend the person, you don't want to tell them how to parent, but you're also like, I'm not going to be dealing with you. I think it would be a disservice to your child, but you have to say it in such a way that it's okay. Your daughter was able to speak and tell me this information herself, like, as in random things, like, can she be absent from this? I'm like, oh my God, can she be absent? Just ask me, like, or she'll email me to ask. So yeah, you've seen definitely a cohort. So again, I think every parent is acting out of, like, for the most part, doing what they feel is right at the time, whether it's equipping them with life skills and being able to fend for themselves. But maybe, and I think, probably sounds, but like, people who have access to, like, money and contacts and networks, but they're probably like, yeah, well, I'm always going to be able to look after Johnny. Johnny's never going to have to look after him because we have money and we have access, and we're going to get them into a job. Even if he does dismally in university, my mate's going to get him a job, and he's going to climb the ranks, and he's going to be. It's like, yeah, but is he going to be a sound person? Like, is he actually going to be somebody that we would want leading or managing? Or where is he going to get those sound communication skills? Or is he always going to be feel that he is entitled to these positions and places? Or Johnny, Jill, whatever. Sorry, I shouldn't use Jill.
Uh-oh. I'll have to edit that out.
Johnny, Jane. Like, so one day you're going to have to, whether it's, grand, if you've got a nest of money for them to fall back on and everything, that's fine. But who they are as a person, or, where they go to when they're on their own, in their own headspace. Like, you can't buy that. You can't pay for that. You can't infiltrate. I know I'm, like, targeting one kind of, segment, but, like, they would, that, well-heeled kind of part of the population had money and possibly time. Very often there would be a parent who could afford to stay home while, and mother. So there was if Dave McWilliams' book, The Pope's Children, and he characterizes and, kind of lampoons a bit, like the mother, the South Side mother with her SUV collecting, the old Satanta from the Squale Skull. So I know I'm drawing on that kind of, persona.
Yeah.
And they are the outcome of, like, I suppose, what people are calling snowflakes. No, you or I would never call our children snowflakes, but somebody somewhere has identified that there's a young cohort coming up that maybe haven't got the life skills to cope with adversity. So that's for me, the way I look at it. It's like, yes, of course, if, my son has an altercation on the street, I can go knock on the door and start giving out to somebody and make a big, but that's not going to help him.
You're a purple belt in Jiu Jitsu. I'd say to more and knock on the door. I wouldn't like you knocking on my door anyway.
But it's not going to help, and if it's more about talking, okay, well, let's unpack this, who's to blame? There's always two people. Let's talk about it. And then what would you ultimately like? Because, little friends, they fall out. But at the end of the day, it's reminding him they're still your friend.
Yeah.
So, they did something bad, but they are not bad themselves.
Yeah,
and, unpacking that and sending him around to apologise.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not, or to let's talk it out. I don't want to fall out. Do you know that little skill set that they can communicate with their buddies?
Yeah.
In a way that, like, I don't get involved, because when parents get involved, the whole thing just escalates and stops being about the kids anymore. It just hits the parents and grows arms and legs. So I would say, like, letting kids fight their little battles now, so that they're equipping themselves as they get older.
Yeah.
To kind of see these challenges. And another thing, then, like, how do you get your kids to face into adversity? Again, I can only, like, something I'm doing, and sometimes I feel quite hard, a little bit cruel, but, like, say I've my kids doing jiu-jitsu now.
You feel cruel for having them do jiu-jitsu?
No, they didn't want to do it initially. Like, they wanted to do it,
but it was hard.
But they couldn't name what it was, particularly my son. And I see a lot of myself in my son. So, like, and sometimes you don't like what you see very often, but then that's what, and I have to recognize that.
Yeah.
He liked the idea of doing it, but when he came against, when he had a partner that was better than him, like, he realized he had nothing. Like, he liked to say he did jiu-jitsu, but he had only started. So it's like trying to teach him, and he didn't want to do it then. I was like, I can't. Now I was like in this dilemma. I was like, I can't let him walk away, because then I know what's happening here. It's his ego. I know that he wants to be the best at this before he, and Tiger's very sporty. He always wins, he wins his sports day and he does well and all football and everything. Like, so he has that natural instinct, but that's only natural, and that's not to be celebrated. Like, I want him to learn how to get better at something too. Do you know, there's no point celebrating him for, oh, great, you ran first in a race. But that comes naturally to you. You weren't out practicing everyday racing, like, it just came to you. But this now you've met your match. And, like, I seen, like, because I was watching for a few weeks, and he was going with a guy that wasn't giving him anything. He wasn't putting up. But then when he was put with somebody that was tough, he didn't want to go back. And I was like, and it was so, I was like, I am so, like, not a bad parent, but I'm like, I had to draw on everything to go, I cannot not let him return here, because he has to face. And so I had to, like, so again, and they're your teachers. I was like having to tell him that he was given a gift in that tougher partner, because that partner will teach you how to get better. Because it's easy if somebody flops over and you go, oh yeah, I know how to do whatever, a choke, or I know how to do it. But you don't, because that guy wasn't giving you any resistance. But now you've got somebody who's going to force you to learn how to do the move better. And it's hard. And I know, because I've been there, but you will get better. And, like, so it was really hard, but we went to the grading. They had a grading night to get their stripes. And again, had to drag him to that. And again, you know yourself, if you're trying to get kids to do something, the easier thing would be to go, forget it. Like, but I was like, okay, get them down to grading. Like, he was being really annoying. Like, but I got him down. He got, like, we did the session, and he got, I think, like, whatever, a few stripes on his belt. And he ran over to me, and the smile on his face. And he was just like, Mommy, don't ever listen to me. I'm never not doing jiu-jitsu. He loved the recognition. And
he knows he earned it.
He earned it. He earned his stripes on the belt, and he was delighted with himself. So it was like, I had to push through. I had to question myself. Am I doing the right thing? And to a point, yeah, maybe it's, at a point where I know, like, if they just naturally kind of maybe veer and swap into something else, that's fine. But in that moment in time, I knew he wanted to leave because he'd met somebody that had challenged him.
Yeah.
And he wanted to leave. And I couldn't let him do that.
You know, what you're saying is magnificent. Like, you're questioning, are you a good parent? And I would argue you're one of the best parents from just what you've explained to me there, because you understand the importance of personal responsibility and empowering people. And why I'm so passionate, like, I'm listening to your story there, I'm like goosebumps listening to your story, because I learned the importance of empowering people from a health perspective when I worked in the health industry for 10 years. When you give people that sense of empowerment, you give them responsibility for something at their health. It's the most important thing they have. They blossom, they flourish under that. The outcomes, the health outcomes for people who have ownership and responsibility is insane. So if you can translate that to everything else in your life, you're creating superhumans. The reason I brought up, because you mentioned it there about parents defending their children because it's almost an extension of their own inadequacies and fears and vulnerabilities. You're doing the opposite. You're empowering your son and your daughter because you've experienced the growth that you've personally gained from going through difficult things, and you want that for your children. That's the best gift you can ever give your children, in my opinion. The best gift you can ever give them is that sense of empowerment and personal responsibility. And now I know why you love Jocko Willink so much. And the way you've answered my question there, you illustrated so many points I wanted to cover in this conversation in that one story about raising children. This is why I think it's so fundamental, because we're trying to pass on the values that we have so we can understand more about ourselves in our parenting styles.
Oh, yeah.
And I believe, and I observe, is what I was trying to say earlier on, I didn't really say it very well, is that a lot of people don't have that sense of personal responsibility, and outsourcing your sense of responsibility to the government or the doctor or the other political party, they're the problem, is becoming accepted. And that's why I'm worried about my children, because if they fall in with a group and that group can influence them and tell them that everybody else is the problem, these people are the problem that you're unhappy, and these people are the problem that you're not succeeding, and you do get a medal for coming 73rd in your race because everybody gets a medal. I have a massive issue with that, and people disagree with me all the time, and that's fine. I'm not trying to tell anyone else how to parent or how to be, but I'm really fascinated when I hear someone like you speak, because you said this once before, maybe it was in the presentation you're doing for Brian, and it just stuck with me from then. You spoke about this idea of giving this to your children. And it just hit me straight in the head, because I need that at 34. I want responsibility. I want to learn and understand how to take control of my own life. And I've stopped getting angry at the government and at everybody else. And people are like, oh, why are you not more upset about these other things? And I get triggered by certain things, sure, like everybody. But I'm like, because it's my responsibility. I've just listened to Jocko's book again, and it's just the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. Extreme ownership. I'm like, that's scary. I don't want to take ownership. And he says it again, and he says it again, and I'm like, right, I'll try this. And now that I'm trying it, I'm like, geez, I feel pretty powerful there. I feel a lot better. It's really hard to do. It was really hard for your son to go back and have his ego bashed. I don't want to get my ego bashed. I hate it.
Yeah.
But on the other side, now I've gotten a little taster. On the other side, you're like, whoa, this is what I get from letting your man hand me my ass for a couple of years before I figure out what I'm doing. I become this thing. Wow, it's really, really powerful. I want my kids to feel that. And to bring us back to the first point, why do I do this on mic? I want other people to feel that. It's powerful because I saw it in people's eyes with their health. That's what inspired me to do this whole thing. People they come back and say, you've changed my life. Not necessarily to me, to the doctor. And he'd say the same thing that I'd say. It's like, we didn't do anything. Like you did
chose it. Yeah, we gave you information. You chose to use it and apply
it's powerful for me to feel that. Like there's an ego in me. It's like, I gave them that information. It's amazing. But it's also powerful to watch that person go, oh my God, and they break out of the depression, or they rekindle a relationship with their partner, or they give up the drugs or alcohol, or they get their job back or something. Like that is real power. Real power.
Yeah, like it was one of the tenets of like key points of choice theory. It's like you can't control anyone else's behavior. You can only control your own.
Yeah.
And when you accept that, it's really amazing. Like
it's
that.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, because you're like, you start recognizing you and the flaws of yourself in this dynamic. So, you're so busy like blaming somebody else, and you're going, okay, well, all I can, if I choose, like say if you're talking about a relationship, if I choose to continue this relationship, what am I going to do? What do I need to change? And how can I be a better person or change in it? Or leave, that's the option. It's like, leave, whether it's a friendship or, kind of a work relationship. It's like, just, you cannot control or make anybody else change. And you can expend a whole lot of energy trying to do so and drive yourself demented. Or you can look at yourself and go, maybe it's me that needs to change here. If I'm not happy in my...
Why is it so hard to do that?
Well, because you have to go dig deep, isn't it?
Yeah,
go into the dark
skeletons.
The shadows. Yeah. But it's relieving, it's empowering. I mean, you don't know, and there's not that, it's not as if you fucking like unwrap like and find the self underneath, like the shiny new self, but it's like just like gradually kind of going, oh yeah, I do that. Maybe it's just behaviors, you're learning going, oh yeah, I, defend myself as opposed to maybe accept what somebody's here and I'm not listening. So maybe if I just listened a little different, maybe this dynamic would change and I won't fall into the same kind of arguments or, negative behavior because I've changed it, because that's all I can do. So rather than like defending myself or getting, het up in an argument, maybe that's, try to kind of control myself or, if whatever it is that you recognize, because that's all I can do is explore myself and my behaviors and go, how could I change to make this work better for essentially me? Like, it's yourself and your relationships, but you have to work on yourself and your self-awareness first and then manage your interaction then with those around you with that self-awareness and knowledge.
It's you're so right, and it's such a difficult journey because, to go back to the marketing piece, no, get your tinfoil hat on, here we go. The powers that be, the system doesn't want us to take that responsibility because it changes the whole dynamic. We're not as reliant on the new thing then. We get off the hedonic treadmill a little bit because we're more focused on ourselves and our own sense of empowerment and our own family, our own little tribe, if you want to call it that. And we're less focused on the promotion and the bigger house and we're less, because the message that I feel we get from a lot of these marketing things we spoke about earlier on, are you actually delivering value? I don't think most of the marketing we're getting at the moment is actually it's actually improving our lives at all. It's telling us that you will be happy when you have this thing. More money, for example, more status, more followers on Instagram. And if I ran these companies, I'd do the same thing because I'm trying to keep the shareholders happy. So I'm not saying they're evil, but I am saying, like you said earlier on, we can be aware of that. It's not good for us. What is good for us is the thing it's the broccoli and Brussels sprouts. It's the stuff that doesn't taste nice. It's the dark shadow. It's the self-work. That's the stuff that's good for us. But it's like trying to tell a child that the broccoli is good for you. They're looking at you like you're fucking crazy. So I find this as well when you're speaking to some people about this stuff, because I don't preach. I don't talk to this about anybody really except on the podcast. But now I'm surrounded by people like yourself who are all talking about this, and they crave this knowledge and this, because it gives you more tools to become a better person. And other people go, you don't need to be better. You're fine just the way you are. I'm like, that's fine for you if that's how you want to live. I know I've more and it feels really good. That's what I'm trying to say here. But we're drowning in messages that really actively counteract that message. Now, you can go really deep on this if you want, but I'll keep it at a surface level there. Most of the messaging I get every single day is, buy this thing and you'll be a better person. Do this thing and you'll be a better person. It's not, look at yourself and empower yourself and then you will be a better person. It's not that at all. It's just the fact that I surround myself with these people by choice, and you challenge me by having this conversation with me. You challenge the way I think about parenting. Every person I actively put in my life now challenges me in some way, and my ego hates it. But there's a little part of me that goes, you're going to be better. It's going to be hard, but you're going to be better.
Yeah. It's interesting, like, marketing, that's as old as the hills of, but you have to identify kind of a weakness or etch out a weakness for a person, to then say, well, now we've got the problem, the solution to your problem that you didn't know you had. So it's creating the problem and then packaging up something to sell it. But like, there's a big kind of movement towards like kind of self-help, packaging up self-help now, and you can see it everywhere. Say for me, like my like feed of ads, like it's probably like it's just constantly different gurus like packaging up their programs, and it's like, oh, it's happening. It's the commercialization of the personal and professional development space, which probably at one stage was just kind of in the realms of Tony Robbins and But now,
which is better than selling cocaine. Let's just have a look at a big picture. It's better people consuming that than cocaine. But I know.
Yeah. Do you know that cocaine was sold to kids?
Yeah.
Back in the early 20s and 30s. Yeah.
Lucky kids.
There's some great advertisements. It's like, oh, we've got this product. How can we sell it?
Was there cocaine in Coca-Cola, or is that a myth?
Yeah. Ooh.
I think it was. I've heard now. Look, I hear this stuff on the internet, and I don't know what the hell is true.
They used to put it in toothpaste.
Yeah, it was in. I think it was in some commercially available products.
Yeah.
As an ingredient.
And then they would sell like chocolate to make you strong.
Yeah.
There was
Like
chocolate to make you strong. And it's just interesting because it's just trying to find some kind of attribute
Yeah.
that this might like sell to. And then over the years we go, oh, that's a heap of crap. So like in another 20 years, we might be looking back at like, the way we thought of things and go, oh gosh, we were so flawed and wrong.
Oh, we definitely will.
And that's scary too, because it's so hard to kind of be so fixed, and set on this is the right way. This is the way to lead my life because maybe, and like to think about that, God, something I felt so strongly about 5-10 years ago, I don't now, or, like my perspective has changed on it. So sometimes it makes me kind of almost wary of attaching kind of values to, you need to be careful of where you attach your values system too. Like one of my biggest fears is like, yes, I might be like, I have boundaries for my kids. If we talk about kids, like my biggest fear is that like it would like that what I think is being like, I'm trying to create boundaries, but giving information, explaining. And I hope that like my kids would see I was doing it to help them. I always talk it through to them. I always tell them the why, why I don't want you to eat lots of chocolate and sweets. Yes, I know when I'm not there, sometimes they do take more than they should, like because probably it's the forbidden fruit. And I'm trying to get that balance right as well, because I don't want it to be the forbidden fruit. So again, like, yeah, it's sweets and chocolates now. It's going to be alcohol and drugs later. Like, so it's like, how do you, explain it to them in a way that they don't want to backlash against the parent, but it's as old a time, like the teenager wants to resist against the parent. So how do I create a space where there is no resistance? It's now down to you, your choices and your responsibility, because it's so hard as a parent. Like if you see your kid heading out and you're like, all the dangers that's out there, that one mistake could have repercussions for the rest of their life, and you want to save them and protect them from that, but you can't be there with them. And so it's like, just trying to make sure that everything, all the information that they need is equipped and there for them. And there's no resistance from me, as in the sense that like, you don't have to rebel. Sorry, rebel is probably the word.
Okay.
I that's what I wouldn't like to create, a space of rebellion. And I'm going to do this anyway, because I need to go at a stage, step back and go, I've given you all the information.
Yeah.
And I don't know, will I be able to, when you just want to save them?
I'm biased. I am biased. I asked you to come on here because I'm biased, because I like what you talk about, and I agree with the vast majority of what you say. So I'm definitely biased on what I'm about to say, but I don't think you teaching your kids the way you do is the same as cocaine and toothpaste. I think if we look at human history, all of the products and the pharmaceuticals and the food that's good for you one day and bad for you, avocados are going to make you live forever and then they're going to kill you the next day, whatever. That stuff changes like the wind, based on data and science. And we know how reliable data and scientists are. I'm just being facetious there. But human nature, we have a very long history of human nature we can observe through wars and dictators and whatever, modern history, ancient history. And the principles, this is why I think I like the Stoic stuff so much. Again, I don't agree with everything, but I like to take a lot from that idea, because these people like Marcus Aurelius and all these people, they did what we're trying to do now, and they looked at human nature as opposed to the specific things we're doing every day, the foods we're eating or what we're buying. They looked at the principles of human nature. So Marcus Aurelius used to speak about perspective is a huge piece. Perspective, when we're looking back, we have a particular perspective, and we now think we're blinded and blinkered by what we live now. But you looking at your children, you know that all you're trying to do is give them tools to figure it out themselves. You're not telling them, and this is where I have such a problem, and I get in trouble sometimes because this cancel culture bullshit. I'm not telling my kid that veganism is good for them, or that carnivore is good for them, or that I'm telling them we need to find out the foods that make us feel good and that make us grow and that make us healthy. And what we know at the moment is that this is what, but the principle is the same. So when you find out, when you've more knowledge than me, when you're in your 30s, because you will, and you know that something else at that, you make a good decision. You don't listen to the horse shit. You don't fall for the marketing. You make a good decision. I want to give you that tool. So I'm not telling my children, like I try and get them to eat healthy food, obviously, but I'm trying to, like you've just explained, I'm trying to explain to them why eating healthy food is a good idea, not you have to be vegan. I'm trying to allow my children explore their world, but I'm giving them the tools that they need. So I'm not sending them out there with nothing, but I'm not telling them you have to go here, 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 and here. When you see your children go out and you're like, oh, you'll know you'll have armed them with as much as you possibly could. From a principle-based approach, you're not going to tell them, listen, guys, do MDMA, don't do LSD, because MDMA, man, you don't want to touch that in. You're not going to tell them specifically because you know that they'll just do the exact opposite of what you're telling them to do. But you're giving them tools to analyze situations, because throughout human history, every mistake that's ever been made has been either narrow perspective, poor judgment, or well, evil is the wrong word, but people who want to do things for personal gain or stuff. So you're trying to look at all that kind of stuff and teach the opposites to the bad stuff and reinforce the good stuff as far as you're aware from your. But I think you have a very, very good grasp on what generally is going to give your kids a really good chance, because you're not telling them what to do. You're giving them guidelines. Yeah. And I subscribe to that model with adults and children. Don't tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Give me some information and some guidelines. The problem we have nowadays is a lot of the information we get is bullshit. So you're trying to figure this out. And I don't necessarily have all these tools to figure it. I can't read a scientific paper really well. 4 years of college, Mr. Abstract right here. Give me that abstract. I'll eat that abstract all day. 7 pages. We'll just stop. Call of Duty to play tonight, guys.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's the tools. So that's why I think you're doing the right. I think you're doing the right thing. We're high-fiving each other in here in the podcast studio. Yeah. But I think you're taking a principle-based approach, as opposed to an idealism-based approach. And nowadays, there's a lot of idealistic
possibly
groups.
Yeah. I mean, they're probably always, not always, but, over time, I suppose that we can only speak about what we're experiencing now. But yeah, we're definitely much more exposure to different possibilities and ways of life or
whatever
belief systems that we weren't really exposed to. I mean, we had one belief system in Ireland in the 80s, like pretty much.
Yeah.
So if you think about that versus take your pick today of who you want to be.
Yeah, and it's a difficult conversation to have. We won't get lost in the weeds there, but we had religion when we grew up.
Yeah.
Religion, I'm not a religious person now, but it formed the basis of my personal philosophy. It gave me the rules. It gave me a roadmap. And I've built that out. I'm building that out now the way I want to build it out, and it's difficult. But I have a foundation. We've no religion anymore. We've got a million religions and a million creeds and a million groups. And
yeah. I think the problem, I suppose, there was no exploration. We didn't look at religion in a philosophical sense.
No.
It was more about this is what you have to do.
Yeah.
There was no space for why, or let's explore what they might meant by that. Or, it was like bad, good girl, bad girl.
Yeah. Which is a big
punishment, for bad behavior. That very often wasn't the girl's behavior. Severe punishment for women. Like if you think about like the mothers and babies' homes, like for mistakes that for thousands and thousands of women was not their mistake.
Yeah.
For variety of reasons. So like, I think there was such a lovely opportunity. Like for if you were to engage with your religion, Catholicism, in the way that it might have been intended to be delivered once upon a time before men in power got their hands on it, and kind of tweaked it to what suited the structuring and ruling of societies at different times. But say that's what you're doing. Like we're trying to control the population. So this is how we're doing it. We're going to tell you that you'll go to hell if you get pregnant or, this sort of thing, like, but going, no, you came up with that, but that isn't where that came from. That ideas didn't necessarily come from it's inherently bad. It might be just that it's a good idea to have a monogamous relationship because you will need a partner to raise that child, or you will need a community. And, there's so many whys about why community works. Like, the church is community. So we're all trying to, in these different ways, build communities around psychedelics, build communities around, our gyms, build communities. We're looking for that sense of community and that human socialization and, interaction and connection with people. That is what the church was before,
before humans got their hand on it.
Well, because it became like it's a dirty word in Ireland to mention Catholicism at the moment, which is a shame.
Yeah.
But the shame came from the top. The shame came from the institutions and systems, not from the people as such. I know, obviously, people you can't. They're interconnected, but like those in power in those systems, dirtied it. They dirtied their own bib in like a horrendous way. But I do feel like, even retail therapy, like people are going to the shopping centre, just looking for somewhere, something, to build their identity on. And the structure of the church did provide something, because there was that accountability, there was that coming together community, there was that idea, maybe of space to talk. Well, it was kind of a one-way street to talk, but, there's the opportunity around those. There's one in every parish, but they're so antiquated now. But now everyone's trying to build their communities, trying to find something. And some people, now, like, you probably need money to attach yourself to various communities. Like, I know, like, the say gym membership, you mightn't be able to afford. Like, young teenagers, they want something. They want to attach themselves to something, but maybe the gym membership excludes them. Like, at £100 a month, they can't join that gym, or they can't be a part of it. So they're on the streets, just trying to find fun, trying to make fun or make play or do something, but where can they build themselves? That was a lot of my research in my undergrad thesis, looking at men's, like, consumption and leisure practices. But one of those things that emerged for me a lot was, like, where can young men find a blueprint to follow of how to be a man in Ireland?
This is so interesting. Okay, I'm conscious of your time, right? So I do want to go into this topic. We've got loads of other topics. So I'm going to ask you right now, will you come back for a second podcast?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
But you
sure.
will come back for a second podcast.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but I do want to, because the question I had for you, I said maybe half an hour ago, was why men? Why were you interested in men with your research?
Yeah. So I suppose at the time I was doing a little bit of research, kind of, I'd studied, like, for my undergrad, I'd looked at women's sense of self and identity in relation to not social media at the time, it was mass media at the time.
Okay.
And the kind of looking at the body. So it exposed me to all this literature on identity and, body dysmorphia and, like, for women, like, construction and the impact of advertising and media on women's, like, kind of sense of self. This was back in, the time where to be skeleton thin was envied, the time of Victoria Beckham in her posh Spice era days. So, like, and Kate Moss. So I was looking at that, but I loved looking at the sociological theories around looking at how we build a sense of self and identity. And I could see there was a dearth of, like, information or research on men and how do men build their sense of self and identity. I was like, I wonder how that would, like, work, or where that could take me. So that's when I went back to do the PhD, I was like, okay, that's what I want to look at. I want to, like, see how do men build that sense of self and identity. And I was looking at different theorists at the time, and went with Michel Foucault in the end. So Foucauldian sociological theories and philosophical ideas around building your sense of self, technologies of the self. So, yeah, so that's the kind of where I started exploring and looking at different, and actually, like, so one of the groups I looked at was GA, which would be of interest to you.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, and the consumption practices. And just, so at that moment in time, I suppose as well, there was a lot of attention at the high rate of suicide for young men, and wondering about, and they're like high levels of single parent families, more so. Do you know, if you think about it, like, that was, say, 15 years ago about 15 years ago when I started that research. So you'd have this emergence of, like, because I suppose we hid away single mothers and parenting, children were, like, adopted off or hidden or, kind of sent to mother and babies homes. But I suppose in the last 20, 30 years, there's been a societal acceptance of single parents and this absenteeism of fathers. Where are they? All pointing at the single mother, but, there is somebody, there was two players here. And we, so those young men were coming up. It probably, I do think a daughter needs a father as well, like, or in that family kind of structure, traditional family structure. But particularly, I was thinking, for women raising young teenage men, there's a lot of societal issues and problems hitting that kind of, like, streets at that stage, I would say. Not to say, like, I don't want to offend anybody or whatever, but, a lot of research says that a child will do well with a female and male kind of involvement. Not saying that has to be traditionally a father, like, or whatever. But, like, even if it's a male in some sense, even evolutionary, like in evolution biology, it's even if it's a male brother or uncle that steps in for that child, great. But there was a lacking, I would say, of men stepping up to be male role models. So it was just interesting to explore that, and the high suicide rate, kind of looking at that, it was like, there's something going on here. There's, it seems to be escalating in Irish society. So that was kind of where I started exploring.
Yeah. There's a point you made there, and it's a really funny one nowadays. Actually, where people get really upset when you mention things like, "I believe what the data would suggest that a male influence in a child's life is a good thing," and people get really upset because what you're not saying is, "I think every couple should be traditional." That's not. That's just not what you're saying. But that's what the opposition. I'm just going to use this general term. The opposition. Anyone who doesn't agree with you for some reason, an easy one to throw at you is, "Oh, Dr. Dee Duffy said this. It's not what you said."
Yeah.
There's certain things that cannot be denied, really.
Yeah.
And to have an influence from a male and a female in a child's life is extremely important because we bring different things to the table. Now, even me saying that, you're not allowed to say that anymore because men and women are not different in any way, or I don't know what the hell's going on anymore. But it's just an important thing to note there. It's not what you're saying.
No.
But it is a very important point.
Yeah, because like again, no offense to men, but like a lot of men didn't show up. The stats are there. Like there's an awful lot of single mothers, but the male counterpart hasn't played their part for many, many years. So I'm not saying, of course, with condemnation that you need to be in a male-female monogamous married, union.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is like it is optimal that there is a female and male influence because both bring different kind of aspects to the table, I would say, in my experience as well.
Yes.
Like I would see that, like certainly Patrick brings so much, like of that, and I don't know, like it ruffles me a bit, and then I'm like, but it's true. Like I'm seeing it, like he encourages more risk behavior than I would. He would encourage, like he would push them out of their boundaries, whereas I would have that instinct to go, I don't say it, but I hold back. Like I was in Clara Lara,
I love Clara Lara.
And I hate, that slide that goes straight down?
Yeah.
I can't do those slides.
You're not even sliding, just falling.
Cannot do them. That feeling, that everything, ugh. But the kids wanted to do it. And I was just looking, going, oh my God. And I was behind the guy who was running it. I was like, no, like to tell them they're too small or something. Because my little one, she was like heading up. I was praying she was too small for it. No. He goes, yeah, you're grand. I'm looking at him going, oh God. And then like they were up there and I was doing my instinct was to hold them onto them and not let them do it. But I knew that was my irrational fear. Like I went over to him and I said, how many accidents have there been on this? How many times has anything happened? All my fears, like when the kids were out of earshot, like he's like, honestly, there's never been anything. And I was still hoping that when they got up there that they wouldn't do it. But they did it. Little one, Ava, girl did it, no problem, laughed at, like she's so Patrick, like she would laugh when she came. Tig hesitated, didn't want to do it, but because she did it, felt he had to because he's older. And he did it and he hated it. He came off it looking at me like, and I just knew exactly how he felt because I was like, I hate them too. I hate that feeling, that out of control, that sense of, for a second. But I knew that Patrick would have a go at me if I projected my fears onto the kids. So I tried to hold back, even though I don't know whether it's maternal or mothering instinct or my fear, I wanted them not to do it. But I kind of held back. So, there is there is things like that he would probably push them forward with before I would, like getting them to do things before I'm maybe think of doing, getting them to do different like kind of tasks that were like, sure, they're ready for that. So there's just that dynamic. Now somebody might say, oh yeah, but we're like two men and we do that like for our kid, or we're two women and we do that. That's okay. But in the stereotypical sense, I'm seeing it, I'm experiencing it, that I would kind of maybe do that bit more of, and I'm not even like somebody who nests around, whereas he'd be more a risk taker, like, and Patrick would kind of push boundaries more.
But it's funny because this is just, again, it's just such a hesitance to discuss this. There is a balance between men and women in everything, in relationships, in parenting, in just general interactions. And we are mislabeling that for men and women now. And there's a lot of this toxic word being put around for masculinity or femininity. There's a lot of undermining of women who decide that they don't want to be career women and they want to raise families. There's a lot of labeling of men who exhibit what I believe now is this lost man syndrome of my generation of men. We're a lost kind of generation because we've grown into this world of social media where we're supposed to be all these things and we don't actually feel those things. And we have all this like aggression and stuff inside us, but we're using it in the workplace now instead. And then you get men who abuse that over people who are more vulnerable. And then it's a mess at the moment. And it drives a wedge between men and women, and men and men, and women. And like, absolutely, two males or two females or whatever can raise children, and can raise children very, very well. But again, that's not the point here. The point is we should acknowledge that what's best for us and best for everybody is an interaction of everybody and everything, and an acceptance and an understanding. And I know that's what the message is, but it's not what the manifestation of the message is. The manifestation is anger and not accepting other people because they're different to you, and shouting at anyone who doesn't immediately understand or accept what you're trying to say to them. And we just create this absolute mess.
Yeah, and that's the problem. People get like lost in the fight, as opposed to actually, well, we're just talking about like what's good for a child. Also, what's good for a child is, you know, again, that phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. I mean,
exactly. That's like, probably the best way to say what I just tried to say.
Yeah. So like, male, female, everybody. More in relationships that child has, the more secure they feel, the more like they're positioned. Unfortunately, too often nowadays, we don't have a village to raise a child. We're very isolated, very kind of set, you know, stuck in our little kind of, we might live on a street, but like, I mean, you know, that idea of community, we have it maybe on one level, but maybe not on another, you know, where if you were with your extended family, you know, you're more likely that they would interact more and like get to have relationships with aunties and uncles and, you know, kind of cousins, and that broader circle, like that traditional circle seems to be the optimal space for a child to kind of nurture and flourish. Like, you know, it's for them to have somebody else. Like I always said, might have been a false sense, but like the closest I had like would have been my granny, even though she was in the west of Ireland. And even as a teenager or in, you know, early 20s, I felt like at least I always have granny, you know, like, you know, if I need to, I can hop on a train. And that gave me such a sense of like, you know, when you're in that like kind of rebellion stage against your parents, it's like, at least somebody, I have another backup here. And that would have been important for my parents too, I suppose, you know, if they realize, like, because if I was to go somewhere, I was going to another person who loves me and cares about me. You know, if I wanted to find solace, isn't it better that I go to another adult who might and who cares about me and will give me sound, solid, maybe advice, than going out to my peers or, you know, kind of loose connections that maybe won't give me the advice that, or support or just the bit of comfort that you need. So to have that would be invaluable for a child. So it's all just talking about what's optimum for any of us. Wouldn't it be nice for any of us to have that?
This is the point. It's any of us. We all need this. And you alluded to there at the end of your research, trying to figure out where men can get this sense of identity, and women as well. And I have this conversation all the time with people because I'm so fascinated by it, because it's so controversial at the moment. If men can understand how to be men, and women can understand how to be women, and people can understand how to be people, we'll have better interactions with each other. If I'm a better person, if I'm a better man, I'm going to have a better interaction with my partner, and vice versa as well. And then we're going to be better for our kids and better for our families and better for able to help other people and to support and grow the community and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I often think about, why are people like Rogan and Jocko and Peterson so outrageously popular with young men? Because we're craving somebody to show us how to do this thing. I'm not as familiar with the female space. I don't know, are there similar? Because like Peterson's message is as applicable to young women as it is to young men. But young men just seem to, like 95% of his audiences when you go to his shows are young men craving this, like, tell me how to do it. And maybe you'll have more information. I'm not as familiar with the female landscape in terms of popular people who are coming to the front now, who are explaining this message of how to be a person, how to develop a personal philosophy, how to not hook yourself onto like a label like feminist or one of these like groups. How to be a person. Do
you know what it is? It's I think maybe another word for it is roles.
Yeah.
Roles. Like, so for me, and I think for women, or sorry, I'm going to speak for mothers probably, you know, it's about how do I be a mother in 2022?
Yeah.
In not a woman, but a mother and a woman who has a career. So it's this, we're in a bit of a crisis as well, I would say, and particularly after the COVID has exposed it completely. And I'm taking great comfort. Like I was on with Brian not so long ago. And then afterwards, I heard a woman speak, and it was like she was telling my story. Like it was Reshma Saujini. She wrote the
Oh,
book Brave, Not Perfect.
Oh, another book. Yeah.
Yeah, and she like developed the Girls That Code. Completely
Yes.
like
Yeah.
just
Was she on Stephen Bartlett's podcast?
yes.
Okay. Yeah. I haven't
Yeah,
listened
so
to
it was
yet, but I saw
after
her. Yeah.
it was after I'd been on with Brian, and then I listened to she came on, like I think she was on the next week, and I was like, that's exactly what like I'm experiencing as well. And it's such a relief when I see, I don't know from a selfish perspective, but a relief to see women who are also in like, kind of these focused on career focused and realizing, do you know what? There's something wrong here. Do you know, like there's something seriously wrong. To hear her say it, I'm like, I've been kind of reading up on her a bit more, and I'd love to get involved because she's like starting like a movement on this of how this is supposed to be. Like, how are you supposed to have a career and be a mother? And like it all points back to, and I've done research on this. I did a podcast last year on gender disparity and talked about work of Professor Linda Scott and the double X economy, and Melinda Gates that wrote The Power of Lift. It was like going, do you know what? We talked about lean in for the last 10 years. And like she was calling BS, Reshma was calling BS on this as well, because she's just like, what was this? She said, we can be everything, or we can be everything means we can do it, or we can be it all is like we have to do it all. Like, so yeah, we can be it all, but then we're doing it all. Like, as in, because you've got this career going, but then you've got this child that arrives that by virtue of gestation and lactation is attached to you for the guts of 18 months to 2 years. That's biological fact. Do you know, if you choose to breastfeed, obviously, but you're gestating for 9 months, and then you're like rearing that child, whether in maternity leave in whatever form it is. So you're talking about this, you are biologically attached to this child. The child will invariably form a connection with you over the partner, if there's one there. So you are caught up in this world. And that's important for the human race survival, that we have that unconditional love. I mean, because like, if we seen it as optional as the male to just leave the child, go, do you know what? This is hard work. No. I mean, like, can you imagine what our human race would become if women didn't make the sacrifices that they do? But then you're like, oh, but I need to keep my career going. Or you're in a situation where you have to, you made decisions like got a mortgage and bought a car, and you've created this lifestyle that has to be sustained financially that your partner can't do on his own or her own, whatever. But, saying traditional model. So you're forced back into the workforce, or you've got this conundrum of going, I'm going back to work to pay a childcare person to mind my child and pay a mortgage. So those combined, that's all I'm working for, really. Probably to shove my child in with someone for 12 hours and to pay for the roof over our head that probably is more expensive than we needed. For what? Because your perspective can change a little bit of like, look, how's this all supposed to work? And anyway, okay, so the research points to wraparound childcare. Wraparound childcare is the answer to keeping women in the workforce, which they want, but they don't want to go back to like or male, whoever is minding. You don't want to go back to like 3-hour commutes, 2 to 3 hour commutes. You don't want to go into meetings where somebody's talking at you that could have been a 2-minute email. Time wasting. You don't want to go to nonsense evening meals when your child needs to be put to bed, or there's a more creative way that we can work if the will is there. But like, so women are left in that conundrum of going, well, and kind of sensibly like make the decision to leave the workforce in a sense, because it's like financially not viable to stay. And what about caring for our children? What about putting value on this little one who needs connection now, so that we don't have a society of delinquents in 10, 15, 20 years? I'm not saying obviously like, but we only have that moment. Like, I think sometimes we live as if we're going to live forever, or we're living for our pension or retirement. But the value is like, these are the moments. Like, you hear it too often when people retire, or, like a sick and dying. They're like, I wish I spent more time with my kids, or I wish like I didn't work so hard. I wish there was something else. And it's like, let's do something about it. Let's do something about it so that we don't all have to have regrets, but that we all enjoy it. Like, and something I'm really getting a sense of, like, I remember as like a kid growing up going, oh, when I have kids, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that and I'm going to bake and I'm going to do art with them. And then I'm like, oh my God, like those things would be just trying to like keep everything like just in order and get everybody from A to B and alive. Do you know what, those ideas? But if we had more time to just be and rest and relax and trust there'll still be a roof over our head, but that we have some kind of enjoyable space and time with kids that are only young for a small time.
That's beautiful. Honest to God, I'm like rapt listening to you here, because it's so rare you get to hear someone speak about this openly. Can I ask you a question? If money was no issue, if this whole system of money that we have here didn't exist anymore, and I don't have a problem with capitalism, but it's just there's problems in our systems.
Yeah.
Would your preference be to have time? Would your with your children, with your family, would your preference be to build a career for yourself in research or something that you were interested in? Would it be a mix of both? Do you have a read on that? Do you have a feeling on that? Because my thoughts on what you've just said are like, why do we let all this pass us by? Marketing, back to that word we used at the start, because we're told this is what we need. You need to be a strong career woman or you're letting women down. If you're not a strong career woman, you don't have value in society. So forget if you've just had kids or whatever. And even if you don't want to have kids, you've no value in society unless you are a career woman. And what that means is you have to be the same as a career man, and you have to be just work all the time. So that's the marketing we're getting. So we all believe that marketing to a certain degree. Do you have a read on what your actual desires would be if money wasn't an issue, if you didn't have to support your family and pay for the roof over your head? What would your preference be, do you think?
It's interesting because, again, I mentioned earlier, sometimes you think back of your thought process 5-10 years ago versus now. 10 years ago, I used to say, if I won the lotto, I'd go to work in the morning. I'd go back to my job. I loved what I was doing. I loved the research and I loved what I was doing. Fast forward 10 years and I'm gone, that is so sad that I identified so strongly with work that I didn't have that other aspects. Whereas now I feel like, certainly with my sport, and the nature of doing jiu-jitsu, now I would like time. I would etch out time for leisure. Whereas I didn't have that in my life before. I wasn't engaging as much in leisure or fun downtime. So I think that's really sad that I thought like that. But so I think a return to adults engaging in more leisure time is definitely would be optimal. 100% would like a blended approach to work and family life. Blended in that wraparound care as well. What I mean by wraparound care is like, that before work and after, or before school and after school, that there is childcare around that school space. They do it in Spain. They have breakfast club and evenings, with the logical sense of in the building that was built for children, the school. I know some schools are against it and other schools embrace it, but having that wraparound care makes so much more sense to me than people having to grab somebody to collect Johnny from school, drop them off. Like, how can I be on a train at 7:30? School starts at 9. I need to be in town for, there's this gap. And, these are the gaps that parents make the decision, this is pointless, or they finish at 2:30. You don't get home till 5. Wouldn't it make sense that there's an aftercare service in the school that has small little toilets and small little things and a beautiful space and safe space for kids? It was designed for kids. There could be rational reasons behind it. To me, if there was a will, I would see wraparound care around that school system, so that we could blend it. So definitely blend it. And I know we're experimenting with the 4-day week, which would be really interesting, because I think
I'm going for the 4-hour week myself.
Yeah, well, that would be could be the dream. But obviously, when you're enjoying what you're doing, you don't work a day in your life. So, if you can get, your fix of feeling that you're being a competent and present parent, along with the drive, and I love working on projects, love my work, when I'm in the zone of working or researching or whatever, that I have that too. So I'm a well-rounded person. That, because I'm not saying that sitting at home with a kid for 12 hours would be ideal. It's very, very hard. So that wouldn't be the optimal. But to have the support systems and care systems and value placed on the childcare would help to go out to work without feeling that you're doing something wrong, that you're feeling probably that you're, sometimes the guilt can come in of dropping kids off to childcare. So yeah, if I would a blended approach.
That's powerful. That's is a really powerful answer. I'm going to wrap it up here now because I'm just having a look at the time here now. But that is a really, really powerful answer, and it ties in nicely, I think, with everything you've said so far about building this sense of self-learning. Because like you've had 10 years to learn that lesson, and you say it's sad that you didn't know back then, but you needed the time to learn that because you didn't have anybody else showing you the way. In fact, you had the opposite. You had people telling you that you were a bad person or not a strong woman if you weren't a career-focused, career-driven woman. But also have the kids too, please, because we need to continue the human race. We'll just ignore that for a second. But that argument gets really convoluted nowadays, I think. And I get sad, and you use that word, I almost had a tear in my eye because I get sad for women specifically. I'm a man. Some people think it's not my place to comment on this, but I love women. I love my mother, my sisters, my fiance, my friends. I love women. I hate seeing women conflicted, just like I hate being a conflicted man.
Yeah.
So I do get it. I don't get all of it, obviously, because I'm not a woman, but it doesn't disqualify me from saying what I'm about to say here. Is I get really sad when I see women who are being told or who believe or who've bought this dream idea of be a strong career woman. And people think you're a misogynist. Work if you want to work. Do whatever you want to do, but find out what you want to do first before you make that decision. And I get sad when I see people and their 40s, mid-40s, 50s, and they're going, oh shit, this wasn't it. And they're high-powered this or super career that. And they're like, bollocks, this wasn't it. Fucking, I can't really go back now, and it's getting a bit too late. And it's really sad to me because it's been sold a fucking lie. But the other side of it isn't the answer either. Like, women stay at home and mind the kids because it's extremely difficult, and it doesn't give you any room for growth or creativity or contribution. That's not the answer either.
No.
There's a middle ground here, and we have to find it. But we're not going to find it. We're just arguing and shouting at each other. But your answer, thank you for sharing that. It was really powerful. And I hope people who listen can embrace the real meaning behind that, the learnings that you've had. So it's a privilege for you to share that with us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Dee, we're tight on time. I've got a million things on my list I want to talk to you about, but I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time and for taking the time for the next podcast you're going to do with me. For coming out here and having a chat with me. Sometimes it's not easy for people to come in because I can be unpredictable sometimes the directions I take with things. But I really, really enjoyed that. I'm going to look back at myself and the camera just sitting really absorbing that information. It's so powerful. There's so many lessons to take from that. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
If people want to follow you on your Instagram because you're an influencer now, if you want to get in touch with you or even have a chat with you.
There's not too many perfect pictures on it, but I do throw them up every now and again. And
there might be people who want to reach out and ask you some questions based off what you've just explained to us there.
Yeah. Like on Instagram, but also probably LinkedIn is where I'm more active.
Excuse me, professional.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not very good on LinkedIn.
Just kind of veered towards that because it's, I suppose, again, probably my orientation towards career focus, kind of so LinkedIn kind of, it would be where I probably I'm more active.
Dee Duffy on LinkedIn?
Yeah, Dee Duffy, Dr.Dee Duffy, I think.
And is the podcast coming back? Journey?
I'm dabbling. I'm still dabbling. I have ideas.
Keep my finger on that. I'm just going to keep pressing that. Every now and again, you'll get a little text.
Definitely there will be.
Okay.
There will be.
Lovely.
A return.
Looking forward to having another chat. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.